There are fresh reports today that former Vice President Dick Cheney was far more involved in the interrogation of terror suspects during the Bush administration than previously thought, and that his intervention reportedly included instructions to waterboard an Iraqi prisoner to help find an al-Qaeda connection. Bob Windrum has that exclusive reporting in thedailybeast.com, where he's a contributor. He's also a senior research fellow at the NYU Center on Law and Security. Bob, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be here, Nora.
Pretty stunning about Cheney's role deepening. Explain what this is. How is it that the vice president was involved in suggesting they use waterboarding on this Iraqi?
Well, what we learned, Nora, is it was the office of the vice president. Specifically as to who within the office, we're not certain, but what we do know is this, that at the end of April 2003, a high-ranking Iraqi intelligence official who the U.S. intelligence believed could have information both on the Iraqi WMD and any connection between Iraq and al-Qaeda, was brought in and was interrogated. And apparently, the office of the vice president thought that the interrogation was too gentle and suggested to the Iraq Survey Group, which was in charge of the interrogations, that he be waterboarded. The Iraq Survey Group, specifically Charles Dulfer, who was the head of it, went to the CIA and said, I don't want to do this. They said, we don't do this. This has only been approved for terrorism suspects, and so he was not waterboarded. But this is all laid out in Dulfer's book, Hide and Seek, and it's quite detailed.
Bob, let me ask you, given that this was after the fall of Baghdad, was this then an effort from the Vice President Dick Cheney's office in order to try and prove that there was a connection between Iraq and al-Qaeda in order to justify the war in Iraq?
Well, certainly, as Dulfer said to me, it would have been very good if connections and WMD could be found. And as he said, it would have brought smiles to the faces of people in Washington. And certainly at this time, we know, because when I was working at NBC, we had senior administration officials visiting us and telling us that, in fact, the WMD hunt was next month's story. And, of course, it was never a story because it was never found.
Yeah, very interesting. Hey, two other interesting things I want to get you on, Bob. One, we have just learned from the CIA that they have turned down former Vice President Dick Cheney's request to declassify some more of those memos. Remember, he wanted those additional memos released to prove that, in fact, these harsh interrogation techniques or torture actually worked and got some high-value information that may have prevented or thwarted other terrorist activities. Why would they have done this, and is this really a setback? How big of a setback is it for Cheney and his efforts to try and prove that what they were doing was worth it?
Well, certainly what it does is it continues the controversy. It continues the controversy between the vice president and the president, the former vice president and the president. And, you know, Cheney, no doubt, is going to come back and claim that this is political. Certainly, however, he will understand, or he should understand, that when you release data, as he complained about with the release of the memos, you take risks. And certainly it would appear that the CIA does not want to take these risks. And those risks deal with sources and methods, how things were learned, how questions were formed, etc. So I have to assume that it's based on reality.
And then we've had this extraordinary occurrence here in Washington, Bob, involving Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and who, of course, has been questioned about whether she knew whether Abu Zubaydah had, in fact, been waterboarded. She said today, when asked if the CIA lied to her, she said, the CIA misled me, essentially taking on the CIA. What happens if the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, essentially accuses the CIA of lying? I mean, this is a war, isn't it?
Well, I think what you're seeing now in terms of what you just spoke about, the dispute between Cheney and the CIA over release of further data, and the now Speaker of the House claiming the CIA was lying. I mean, these are things that very often happen when the CIA is part of any controversy. And what people in the agency will tell you is two things. Number one, we are doing the business, the dirty work of whatever administration is there. And at the end of the day, we're the ones who usually get left holding the bag. The other point, however, is this, and I've been told this by multiple sources at the agency over the years, was that when the Congress people were briefed, and only the highest ranking people were briefed, several of the congressmen and senators not only said that they were fine with it, but one, I am told, a very high-ranking senator in the Intelligence Committee, said, my constituents would be surprised if this was all you were doing. So,
well, let me just, and one of the other things, Bob, that I have found out, and I spoke with the CIA today, is that in fact, is there sort of this question about the briefing that in fact, Congressman Hoekstra, who is now, of course, on the Intelligence Committee, has said, let's get notes from that meeting that's in question, September 4th, 2002. And Panetta, who is now the head of the CIA, has written back to Congressman Hoekstra, said those notes are available to any congressman or their staff to come to the CIA and look exactly what was briefed about on that day. And, of course, the CIA has said publicly they're standing by their records that, in fact, they briefed on the very interrogation methods that has been used, that Speaker Pelosi says that she knew nothing about at that time.
Well, certainly the one thing here, Nora, that we're experiencing is a storm of paper. There are lots and lots of documentary records on all of these things, as proven first by the legal memos that were released, and Cheney's desire to release further information, and now you have the CIA saying, we have these notes. Now, certainly there is just a wealth of information here. The CIA is a bureaucracy. Never forget that. More than anything else, it is a bureaucracy, and it is a bureaucracy that has learned to protect itself in crises. So you will find that there is a ton of paper out there, and that paper will be both positive for them and negative. But the question will be, how much of it will be declassified? And I think that at this point in time, the declassification process is becoming political.
Yeah, well, they've turned down the former Vice President Dick Cheney. Bob Windham, great reporting. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.